Alright class, this is the last video before your quiz. This is Partial Fractions Decomposition Day 2, which deals with repeated linear factors on the bottom. So I'm going to skip number 1, which is review. And hold on, this isn't moving, so hold on, let me get this back up here. There it goes. Alright, so we're going to skip that one and go down to the case 2 where you have repeated linear factors. So the first thing you have to do is factor the denominator. So that's what I'm going to do first. X plus 2 over, I have to factor an x out. I get x squared minus 2x plus 1. And that factors even more into, actually I'm going to write it down here, x plus 2 over x, and then you get an x minus 1 quantity squared. So if you guys notice, this is a situation where we have x as a factor, which was what we saw yesterday, but we also have x minus 1 squared, and we didn't see that yesterday. That's a repeated linear factor. So to set it up, you set it up the same way you set the non-repeated linear. A will have an x under it, that's one of the factors. B, here's where it changes. We're going to have actually two different fractions, B and C. Because in order to get this as a common denominator, it's possible we had a fraction with an x minus 1 under it, and it's possible that we had a fraction with an x minus 1 squared. So when you do repeated linear, you need to have x minus 1, or the factor by itself, and the squared factor both in your setup. So now we have our setup. It's now very similar to what we did yesterday. You multiply by the LCD, which is the x times x minus 1 squared. So when you do that, you're left with an x plus 2 on this side. The a multiplied to this, the x's will cancel, so you're left with the a and the x minus 1 quantities squared. You cancel one of the x minus 1's with the b, so we just are left with x and then x minus 1. And then finally, if you look at c, both x minus 1's will cancel, so we're left with just c times x. So this is our setup and our equation we're going to be using now to find our missing letters. It's very similar at this stage to what we did yesterday. We want to pick the x values that'll help us find a, b, or c. So if you look at this, the two factors are x and x minus 1. So you want to pick when x is equal to 1 and when x is equal to 0. So when x equals 1, I put a 1 in to each place. I get 1 plus 2 equals a. If I put a 1 in here, I'm going to get a 0. Plus b. If I put a 1 in here, I'm going to get a 0, so I'm just going to put a 0 there. Plus c times 1, or just c. So in essence, these go away. I'm left with just c equals 1 plus 2, or 3. Alright, now I have x equals 0. Plug 0 into the top, you get 0 plus 2 is equal to a times 0 minus 1 squared plus b times 0, because that's going to go to 0, and so will the c. So this becomes just a equals 2. So I found a and c. This is where the change comes in. Now we need to find b. And in order to find b, you need to use all of the stuff we have already, and you want to pick a random x value. You can pick any x value. And then use the found letters already. Found letters. Okay. So we're picking any x value and use the found letters that we have already. So we've used x equals 0 and 1 to help us get those letters. Now I'm just going to say x equals 2. I'm also going to say that a equals 2 and that c equals 3. So now when I do this, I plug all that information into this top equation here. And when x equals 2, I get 2 plus 2 equals a, which is 2. Then I get 2 minus 1 squared plus b, which we're looking for, times 2 minus 1 plus c, which we have is 3 times 2. So that's my equation. Now notice how there's only a letter b in there. I have 4 is equal to, this becomes 2 times 1, which is 2, plus 2 times 1, or 2b, and then plus 6. So if you move 8 over, you get negative 4 equals 2b, and b equals negative 2. So now I have my final value, so I can write my partial fraction decomposition as a, which is 2, over, I think that was just over x. You have to look up at the top or see your page. Plus b, which is -2, over just the individual factor. And then plus c, which is 3 over the squared factor. That is the partial fraction decomposition. That's the decomposition of the original fraction. Okay? So again, it's very similar to yesterday. Let's do one more. We're going to do the next problem on the next page, because the one following it is actually a homework problem. So it says write the partial of this. So this one's already factored for us. It's actually easier. I'm going to set it up here. I have a over x minus 2. Now that this x minus 1 is your repeated factor, so we're going to say that b will be over x minus 1 and c will be over the squared piece of it. Now I'm going to multiply everything by x minus 2 and x minus 1 quantity squared. When I do that, I get the equation x squared plus x equals a, the x minus 2's cancel, so I have a times x minus 1 quantity squared. For b, the x minus 1 cancels, so I get b times x minus 2 and an x minus 1, plus c, the x minus 1 squareds will cancel, and I'm left with the x minus 2. So there's my new equation for this problem. And then we do the exact same process we did for the last problem. Figure out which x values will help you cancel out things. So we're going to do that. The first x value I want to use, which is one of my denominators, it's 2. I can use x equals 2. So I say 2 squared plus 2 equals a times 2 minus 1 squared plus b times 0, because if I put a 2 in there, it's gone. If I put a 2 in for the c, I get a 0 as well. So you should get a equals 6. The other value that'll make something 0 is 1. So if x equals 1, I get 1 squared plus 1 equals a times 0, because the 1 will cancel it out, plus b times 0, because the 1 will cancel that out, plus c times I was jumping ahead. It's 1 minus 2. I was thinking it's going to be -1. That's why I did that. So I get 1 plus 1 is 2 equals -c, or c equals -2. Now that I'm armed with a and c, I need to find b. I use a and c and then another x value. I'm going to use x equals 3. It's better to use something that's lower, because it makes the computations a little easier. You can also use x equals 0 if you wanted to. So x equals 3, a equals 6, and c equals -2. Just so I know what I'm putting into everything. So now that x is 3, I get 3 squared plus 3 equals a, which is 6, 3 minus 1 quantity squared, plus b we don't know, 3 minus 2 and 3 minus 1, plus c is -2 times 3 minus 2. Alright, so I've filled in all of the letters with numbers except for b. Now I'm simplifying. I get 9 plus 3 is 12. 3 minus 1 is 2. Squared is 4. 4 times 6 is 24. 3 minus 2 is 1. 3 minus 1 is 2. So we have a 2b. And then we have -2. So now I move, this is 22 pretty much. So if I subtract 22, I get -10 equals 2b. So I get b equals -5. Now I have all three of my pieces. I can write my partial fraction, or my fraction decomposed. So I can say a is equal to 6 over x minus 2 plus b, which is -5 over x minus 1 plus c, which is -2 over x minus 1 quantity squared. And that's where we're going to leave it for today. I'm only doing those two problems for the video because the other one is in your homework and we don't need to do the review. So hopefully the music choice was adequate. I have no clue what I get until after I do these videos. So we'll cross our fingers and hope you like the video.